again.
All right. Thank you, Edwin. Boy, what a voice. Just remarkable. That guy was something else. And I don't know too much about his personal life or whatever, but he blessed us with some wonderful, wonderful music. All right, let's get right into it, everybody. Let's talk. You know what? Yes, it's time to discuss the news on the war. The breaking story, of course, is, you got it, that intel-oriented reporters and even U.S. senators like Senator Blumenthal, of all people, are saying that Trump and Hegseth are pushing for U.S. troops on the ground in Iran. So let me give you some of this stuff. And this looks to be the direction that a lot of people are going with their prognostications and some of their informed information. Larry Johnson is talking about how they're looking for blood donors in multiple bases in Germany. Here's DropSite on this. U.S. Senator and Senate Armed Forces Committee says after classified Iran briefing from top military brass, quote, "We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran." So let's go. Senator Blumenfeld says, after Iran briefing, I emerged from this briefing satisfied and angry, frankly, that I have for any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. Maybe more angry, this dissatisfied, more angry. Here we go. Yeah. There's a little more V's on this. I'm going to play with this a little bit. Here we go.
I emerged from this briefing as dissatisfied and angry, frankly, as I have from any past briefing in my 15 years in the Senate. I am left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war.
Okay, so he says, I'm left with more questions than answers, especially about the cost of the war. And we're like super blurry, so I'll just reduce myself here. So here's a problem. Mr. Blumenthal is not discussing the major item, which is there's no declared war. This is, again, it's just ridiculous. It's a complete Alice in Wonderland world. They're just talking about the functional problems of, well, you know, I'm not hearing what I want to hear about Donald Trump. I don't know whether they have a plan for this. I don't know whether they're going to go in. I don't know how they're going to spend money. I don't know what they're going to do with the armaments. Those are all secondary questions, Senator. The key question, the only question on your mind is Donald Trump deploying soldiers without a declaration of war? If he is, then you need to get to the House and tell the people in the House you need to move to impeach him. That's all. You stop there. You don't think about anything else. You do what you swore to do. Otherwise, why are you there? If you're gonna allow the guy to go out there already and slaughter 180 kids with Tomahawk missiles and blast all sorts of hospitals, if you're gonna allow that, then maybe you should pause and look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe I've made a mistake. Perhaps I'm not maintaining any sort of order here. For goodness sake, it's so ridiculous. It's just absurd that they operate this way. Meanwhile, President Trump's latest pronouncements on the immoral and unconstitutional U.S. aggression against Iran ring as hollow as ever, revealing a conflict that is anything but the easy win he once touted. This disgusting assault, launched without congressional declaration of war, funded through tax theft and enslavement of future generations, continues to claim innocent lives while draining American pockets through the coercive theft of taxation, all to fund a bloody escapade that is destabilizing the global economy. So let's hop over here and give you a little something from, you got it, Joe Piscopo.
The big story, the big story, the big story, the big story.
That's right, Joe. And we're going to go with this. Trump continues to dance around truth regarding the Manab slaughter, while a New York Times reporter does actual journalism. So we have two segments here. First, lies regarding nukes. Now the narrative is changing. It's just like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's amazing. If you're not familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide, Arthur Dent, the main character, and Ford Prefect, this alien who rescues him from Earth just before it's destroyed. They're traveling the galaxy and they encounter all these crazy people and they escape from near death by being brought aboard what's called the B Ark. It's one of 3 arcs that were launched from a planet called Golga Frenchum. And everybody aboard the B Ark are basically middle managers, documentary filmmakers, PR flacks, and just people who are basically useless. And they're talking to them and they say, well, what's going on? Why are you on this ship? And they said, oh, well. And the captain has been taking a bath for 3 years. He just doesn't do anything. And he turns to number 1. He says, number 1, tell them why we're here. And he goes, well, it was because, of course, the whole planet was doomed. And the captain says, oh, yes, of course, yes, we were doomed, they told us. Really, how were you doomed? Asks Ford Prefect. Well, we were in impending danger of being swallowed by a giant mutant star goat. Yes, I remember them telling us that. And then his number 1 says, that's not what I heard, sir. I heard that we were going to be blown up by the 3rd planet of the... And then another person in this says, that's not what... So they told them all different stories to get them all to go aboard this ship. And the Arthur Dent and Ford Prefect realized that this was just a ruse to get rid of a 1/3 of their population that they thought was useless and just send them away. Now, it would be great if we could just take Capitol Hill and do that. Wouldn't that be good? Hey, there you go. You can go to Golga Frenchum, right? But that's essentially what Douglas Adams did to skewer all of the nonsense and excuses that these people give. And here's Donald Trump. Now it's about the nukes. They were within 20 minutes of making Jiffy Pop popcorn. Did you know that? So, of course, they had to attack Iran.
Just a short while ago, they told Mr. Witkoff, who is standing right over here, they said, they actually said, we want to keep building. Essentially, in a real nutshell, we want to continue to build nuclear weapons. If we didn't knock out Midnight Hammer, if we didn't knock out their Iranian potential, if we didn't do that with Midnight Hammer, they would have had a nuclear weapon. They would have used it long before now.
Really? So does anybody recall that about a month before they did their Midnight Hammer, Tulsi Gabbard and the IC said, a couple months before, that Iran was not pursuing a nuclear weapon? Did anybody bother to ask Donald Trump during the day, hey, Donald, when you killed the former Ayatollah and now his son has taken over, despite the fact that his son basically saw every member of his family, his immediate family, wiped out 10 days ago. Donald, did you know that they had a fatwa against nuclear weapons? Did you know they were open to IAEA inspections and always showed that they weren't pursuing nuclear weapons? Then how is it that you can say they were within weeks of having a nuclear weapon and using it? Because most of the people in this room recognize that that is utterly false. The emperor has no clothes. It's Golga Frenchum. It's a giant mutant star goat. God, I wish Douglas Adams were still here.
The essence of what he says is...
So that one, and you can check out the full Ron Paul Liberty Report for that one. I was able to pull that from the Ron Paul Report. They did a great job. Now let's talk about the Manab Slaughter, okay? And this is just not Karen Slaughter, the novelist, who's terrific. The Manab Slaughter. This is just amazing. Check this out. This complements to this New York Times reporter. This has been cited by numerous people. This was on the Ron Paul Report, but also Judge Napolitano brought this up with Matt Ho, and we'll show you that version of that as well. Here we go.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation, but tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Unbelievable. Now, I want to go over to the news notes, everybody. and show you a little something, because inside the news notes, if we go down here, you'll see there's a ton, and I didn't even realize that there was this much in there until we put this out today. This is a massive news notes today. We've got, I don't know how many links, probably 40 links in there, and I know some people look at it as almost overwhelming sometimes because there's so much information there. Again, this is just sort of the way that I operate. And if you think that it's worthwhile for you, I hope it is. I hope there's a lot of good information, whether it's too much or not. I hope you find it really worthwhile, and you just look at this as a massive machine that will not stop, because I want to get this information out to you. I think it's very important. We only have a certain number of seconds on the planet, so I want to get this out and defend freedom and peace. So I want to note this. Here is, of course, Trump is all over the proverbial map when it comes to the Tomahawk strike on the Manav school. A New York Times reporter asks key questions. So you'll see this from InfoLib News. This is the X feed on this, where he shows the questions. And Trump says, well, Tomahawks are used by others, you see.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Mr. President, you just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government.
So we've heard that before. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting is when Donald Trump replies, I don't know enough about it, I don't know. Does that instill a lot of confidence in you that this man, who evidently doesn't know enough about his oath to the Constitution, has sent soldiers and armaments to that region to engage in what he wants done, and then he doesn't know enough, whereas you know because you've seen it with your own eyes? So he's either so ignorant he shouldn't be in charge of this, even on the level of their breach of the Constitution already. That shows you how dangerously reckless this is. Or he does know and he's lying. Either way, at the top of this gigantic empire of lies pyramid of the United States history, that's a very, very dark sign. So let's go to Matt Ho and Judge Napolitano on this, because Matt Ho and Aaron Monte brought up a couple significant things. I've got Aaron Monte recorded already, and I'll show you a little bit of what Aaron had to say. But with Aaron, he also brings up something. In fact, let me go to Aaron first before I even go to Matt. Let me show you Aaron, and I think you'll find Aaron's comments are actually very similar to some of what we heard before about this when we heard from Scott Ritter. So let me go over here and get this all queued up for you here. Yeah, all right, here we go.
Is there anything more laughable than this? Chris, number 10.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hickson? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating.
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
Okay, so we already noted how utterly fatuous that is. Just ask some of the guys who survived the boat attacks in Venezuela. Just ask the people in Gaza who have had their kids recovered with bullets from the IDF in their heads. Just ask any of the people who've been attacked by the United States in, say Serbia. Ask the United States attachés who helped the Ukrainians target civilian locations inside Russia. Ask any of those people, or perhaps ask the people who have had their family members kidnapped by ICE and taken away, even though they haven't harmed anybody. And many of them died. In fact, 4 more deaths in the hands of ICE. We'll cover that.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran.
Can you give us an idea?
Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Well, who knows what he claims to have seen. He was pressed again on this by a reporter for whom my hat is off. Watch this back to back at the Trump press conference yesterday. Chris, back to back 18 and 19.
Tomahawk missile likely destroy that Iranian girls' school. So will the U.S. accept any responsibility?
Well, I
for
haven't
that strike?
seen it. And I will say that the Tomahawk, which is one of the most powerful weapons around, is used by, is sold and used by other countries, you know that. And whether it's Iran, who also has some Tomahawks, I wish they had more, but whether it's Iran or somebody else, the fact that a Tomahawk is very generic. It's sold to other countries, but that's being investigated right now.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation, but Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
I mean, does he expect, I guess he does, the American public to accept that these 170 girls were incinerated? Obviously, the American military thought they were bombing something other than a school, but they used an incendiary device in which the fuel of the missile, the unspent fuel, itself ignites and burns like in a furnace, everything in sight.
The reporter questioning Trump there is Sean McCreesh of the New York Times, and he's gotten a lot of acclaim, I think, because it's a rare instance of someone doing adversarial journalism with a person in power, and in this case, doing it to highlight the fact that the U.S. massacred a bunch of civilians, which is always swept under the rug. It's never treated to be a very important story. So this is an important line of questioning here, and Trump's excuses are just so transparently ridiculous. He's suggesting that Iran got its hands on a Tomahawk missile and then bombed their own school, as the reporter, Sean McCreesh, points out.
I know you're saying to yourself, I can't imagine it. Well,
That'll just go right past. I actually left this in without editing it because I wanted to compliment Mandy Patinkin and Catherine Grody for supporting some of the poor folks who are trying to survive in Gaza.
saying to you, imagine it.
Imagine what.
That Iran did it. And it was obvious from the start that this was the U.S. and Israel. They know exactly where these missiles hit. If it wasn't them, they would have denied this from the start. And I said this immediately afterwards, that this was them. The fact that they're not denying it shows that this was them. They knew it was them. And they were just slow walking an acknowledgement of it, because if you acknowledge at the outset that one of your first attacks in an unprovoked regime change war that you've launched is a girls' school where you've massacred more than 150 children, that's not going to do well for your propaganda campaign to keep the war going. So that's why they've been slow walking this. And Pete Hegseth kept saying, it's under investigation. It's under investigation. That's all I'm going to say. And because he knows exactly that this was that this was the U.S. And also, it has to be pointed out that the U.S. media coverage of this, with the exception of that New York Times journalist, has just been so derelict. This should have been front page headlines for days, every single day since then. This is a massacre of more than 150 children in at the outset of an unprovoked war. How is this not front page news? It got buried. I think the New York Times had a story. One of the first stories on this was page A11. Imagine that, massacring a bunch of kids at the outset of a war, and you're going to bury this story. And also, I heard Scott Ritter say this on your program, and I just want to underscore the point. This is the responsibility of Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth bragged about how he had loosened the rules of engagement, basically taken away constraints on U.S. military officials as they wage war, which means less oversight, less accountability for attacks like this, which means probably that when they were using, like whatever they used to bomb this school, AI, I assume, that there was less layers of accountability, less of a chain of command, less review of these targets. And I believe you can draw a direct line, as Scott Ritter said, between Pete Hegseth loosening these rules and that massacre.
So I do want to pause it there and reiterate the point that I brought up. And this is also in a separate video that's over at our Rumble channel. I do want to stress the philosophical point here, although I agree with Aaron Mate and Scott Ritter about the practicalities or the immediate cause and effect relationship and culpability of people like Pete Hegseth and so on and so forth, the entire universe of this would not have occurred if it weren't for Donald Trump engaging in what the Israelis want him to do, decades of the United States blockades, attempts to overthrow Iran in coincidence with Israeli influence in Iran, lies about Iran, the ginning up of hatred against Iran for no reason whatsoever, and of course their breach of the Constitution going in and doing this. And then we go deeper into the philosophy of the state, and then we recognize again that it is the people who operate the state itself and force you to pay for it that now make you part of this black history, this dark history, and make you culpable in a way. Now, how is it that if you pay something under threat of imprisonment and you do it under duress, that you're culpable? I think that is a very important question to ask. Philosophically, do you have a responsibility to say, no, you are taking my money. I don't want my money taken. I want to hold on to my money. You will use it for X, Y, or Z purpose, but the taking of it is the problem, and it opens it up to be used in many nefarious ways. At every instance, we have these philosophical questions that arise. And when it comes down to the final target, we ourselves can probably be absolved because we do it under duress. We have to run away. We have to flee. Otherwise, they will hurt us. They will throw us into jail. But everyone else who receives that stolen money, who is the recipient of the stolen goods, whether it's the politicians or the bureaucrats or the arms manufacturers or the soldiers on the ground, and this is the most recent video that just went out at our Rumble channel, those soldiers can never claim self-defense. And it is the trigger of a political organization deciding whether it, even if it had been constitutionally decided and they declared war, they have forced themselves on you to be part of their declared war. Now, in this case, they didn't do it. So it's even darker, and they've completely abridged their broached their oaths to the Constitution. But at every instance, philosophically, the Constitution wouldn't excuse it if they forced you to pay for it. And the Constitution does not excuse those people who decide, yes, we're going to declare a war against some other country, to force you to pay for their aggressive activity. And once that aggressive activity is decided on, whether it's constitutional or it's unconstitutional, inevitably you're going to get civilians who are killed. And I read last night out of that book about chivalry. And I said, this is how chivalry arose in the Middle Ages and so on and so forth. This is a major problem when you've got people assuming that they are part of the governance of a state, rather than in the olden days when they understood that there was a king who ruled over them through force and they were the subjects. Now, as much as people would like to say this is government by the people, for the people, of the people, as Lincoln said, it's not. It's by the group that can get control. It's for the group that can get control. And it's off the backs of all the other people, plus future generations. Now, how they can be culpable in this, I don't know. Just like us, right? They haven't even been born yet. And they're going to have to pay for the killing of that 176 children population in that school, plus about 15, I think, adults. So this is obviously a philosophical question, and it will not be answered by those people who say, well, if we can just get them to go by the Constitution. No, again, the Constitution, from an anarchist, pure peace, philosophical point of view, is foisted on people. And the answer is not, well, maybe you can get enough people to take control of the system that's created. No, the system that's created is forced on people who don't want to be part of it. And from there, if any civilian is killed, it doesn't matter whether or not it was done constitutionally or not. And this is a major problem for the soldiers out there who accept a weapon that was constructed and handed to them on the backs of a taxpayer. Because as I mentioned, and I said this before, they have no right to self-defense if they are operating through ill-gotten means. So Aaron Monte makes a very good point, just like Scott Ritter does, to cite Pete Hegseth there, because Hegseth did make this policy change, and it might have led to exactly what we see with the slaughter of those poor children. But the context, the machinery of this was put into motion by Donald Trump and by Congress people who didn't impeach Donald Trump and stop this. It would never have happened, regardless of Pete Hegseth or anything. It would never have happened if all those years of United States aggression towards Iran and this most recent decision by Donald Trump in conjunction with Netanyahu had not been achieved and followed through. Those kids would be alive. So it's a truly sad situation. And I want to compliment the judge and Aaron Monte for hitting on that again. And I think it is valuable to bring up that philosophical point, because that's the eternal problem. Now, Matt Ho and the judge also have some great comments. I want to play some of this.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still
But
investigating.
the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done. We think it was done by Iran
Can you give us an
because
idea
they're
of
very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Probably the only truthful thing he said is that he doesn't know enough about it.
Right.
But for him to conclude that the Iranians murdered their own school children when we know that this was done, 2 missiles called a double tap. You know this better than I am. I'm recounting what Scott Ritter said yesterday. The second, an incendiary one, conformed so that the remaining fuel in the missile will ignite and incinerate everything. The girls were burnt to a crisp.
Right. The first, I'm reminded, Judge, of a Stonewall Jackson, the American Confederate general, what he said about war and lies. And he said something like, paraphrase, he said, have you ever considered what a source of lies a battlefield can be? I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it exactly correct, but this idea that this is what comes from war. This is what battlefields produce. They produce lies. And we just see one after another being presented, this confusion. And so these people in charge don't even have the integrity to have their messaging straight, to even understand why they're doing it and be able to articulate it. I mean, this is why this notion of calling this Operation Epstein Fury, there's a lot of credibility to that, because if they cannot present why they're doing this, if they lie about it constantly and they can't even come up with a unified lie, then what is the real reason that they're hiding here? But these double tap strikes are something that the United States has done throughout this century. This extends back through the Iraq and Afghan wars. The idea of hitting follow-on forces, but more particularly or especially hitting first responders. Idea that you bomb something and then people are going to rush there to help, and hitting them. And so
there you go. Now, I wanted to blow the horn 3 times on this for a couple reasons. I think that this is so significant as a line of demarcation for people never, ever to forget what this government did. And it acts as a leverage point to it's a window to look, as Matt Host says, at other instances, whether it's the Manning release of the video that Private Manning gave to WikiLeaks that exposed Iraqi located war crimes for the United States military, shooting reporters and then shooting the rescuers who tried to get them. Or one might want to recall the fact that Bill Clinton wiped out reporters. Remember Serbia, Kosovo in the 90s? I don't see this problem getting fixed, but I do think it's very important to repeat this for the legacy of those kids who were killed. At least one more voice can speak up right now and put this information out there and say, no, we're not going to be quiet about this. Chris Murphy, again, a man who hung out with Nazis on a stage in Kiev, who met with Oli Tyanibok of the Svoboda Party, and who helped co-write the Portman Murphy so-called Countering Foreign Propaganda Act, again, is doing a good job here. Maybe it's for political reasons. Maybe he's shooting for a vice presidential run or a presidential run from Connecticut. I don't know. But as I noted, again, Chris Murphy speaks up some more regarding the Manab mass slaughter. Headline, unforgivable under any circumstances. Senator Murphy responds to analysis that U.S. likely is responsible for the Iran school strike. Now, this one comes to us from CNN and Jake Tapper. We'll just play a second of this to give this man some credit and hope that he'll be outspoken if there were a different president in the office.
So new evidence suggests that the U.S. military may have been responsible for a strike on a girls' elementary school in Iran. Iranian officials say at least 168 children and 14 teachers were killed. We have not independently verified those numbers. Trump was asked about it. He said he thinks Iran did it. What do you know as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? And if it was the U.S., do you think there should be accountability? And do you trust Secretary Hegseth to bring about that accountability?
I think it is likely the United States that carried out this attack on this school. I think it's unforgivable under any circumstances, but the fact that this was one of our first targeting decisions, that this mistake was made on the first day of war, I think speaks to the incompetence of our leadership at the Department of Defense.
Okay, so again, now the criticism comes in. It's not about incompetence. It's about immorality. This is one of the things that drives me crazy. When I hear people, I heard someone, I think David was reporting on something about, the incompetence or inefficiency of the government and that sort of thing. And I was like, and David, I think, would agree with this. He was just, touching on this in a number of things he was discussing. And I put it into the chat. I was like, and a more efficient, immoral government is not something that you want. A more competent, immoral government is not something that you want. So again, it doesn't make a difference philosophically and over the long term, morally, whether or not they are competent evildoers or incompetent evildoers. They're evildoers. You stop there. And again, it's not the outcome necessarily, because you don't have to arrive at those outcomes if you stop it and you nip it in the bud at the immoral act of forcing somebody to pay for something. It's the open doors to debt financing off of future generations who have no say over these murders and will pay for them ex post facto. It's that immorality. It's the immorality of going into your kitchen and saying, you're not going to have that for dinner this week. We're going to take some of your money and we're going to fund it to kill another child. Or perhaps not even another child. We're going to do it to fund to kill a soldier in another country that we're going to portray as a bad guy, but is not attacking you, has nothing to do with you. We're going to tell you it's for your protection. Aren't those enough insults that tell us that this sort of thing will happen again? It will continue happening. It doesn't matter how much they train these guys because the immorality is there. They have no incentive. They can get your money regardless. And then the people who will judge it will be their own selections. Now, there could be some edges on this. People will say, well, you know, Gard, really, those young children, if they had been, I understand that. But the lesson overall has to be stop it at the source. So I think there's room to discuss it all. Well, I want to mention this. Will the U.S.-Israeli monster target Karg Island tactically now? Let's move into some of the tactics of this, where Iran stores massive amounts of fuel. Here we go. Headline, Iran war. Tehran's oil industry is powered by Karg Island in the Gulf. Now, I had heard about Karg Island, and I mentioned it the other day, and I couldn't remember the name of it. So last night I did some lookups, did some research. So here's what I've got. And there's a couple articles. I actually got a bunch of articles. I only linked to one here. Karg Island, also spelled Kark Island with a K at the end, is a small island in the Persian Gulf off Iran's coast. And it serves as the country's primary oil export terminal. It handles roughly 80 to 90% of Iran's crude oil exports with massive storage tanks, big pipelines, and of course, loading facilities that can process up to 7 million barrels a day. It's often described as Iran's key economic lifeline for oil revenues. So what does this mean? If the United States targets Karg Island, they will be throwing Iran into a frozen mode. So here we go. Iran's Karg Island, a small but strategically vital strip of land nestled in the waters of the northern Persian Gulf, has been left untouched by U.S. and Israeli forces, even as the Middle East conflict enters its second week. The Coral Island, which is located about 15 miles off the coast of mainland Iran, serves as the centerpiece for Iran's oil industry. As we noted, around 90% of the nation's crude exports pass through it before tankers then travel through the Strait of Hormuz. The island is also said to have a loading capacity of, as I mentioned, 7 million barrels per day. An attack would also likely prompt further energy market volatility at a time when oil prices have soared to nearly $120 per barrel. Seizing the island would cut off Iran's oil lifeline, according to Petros Katinas, a research fellow in climate, energy, and defense at RUSI, a London-based defense think tank. This is what Katinas told CNBC by email. Of course, with shipping via the Strait of Hormuz now stopped, they cannot sell oil anyway. But looking ahead, seizure would give the U.S. leverage during negotiations, no matter which regime is in power after the military operation ends. Yet, seizure would require a ground troop operation, which this administration seems hesitant to undertake, at least for now, he added. So this all comes down to the political ramifications of what it would look like for their illegal military operation to go and take that island, seize it, and then get hit by a bunch of hypersonic missiles and see all the American soldiers wiped out there as the Iranians sacrifice the infrastructure and kill the Americans there. Because that's what would happen, obviously. So that's why Donald Trump hasn't done it yet, because he'd be laying a lot of soldiers there to be sitting ducks. And I think he's not so stupid as to think, well, maybe the Americans might not respond to that. Now, there's another big one that I want to talk about. The oil industry. Want to give you Exxon, because this is the one that I mentioned just happened, or at least that I just saw, to lead to our economics coverage of this. Headline, Exxon evacuates personnel in the Middle East. Now, I'll show you Exxon stock. I was monitoring that a little bit earlier today. It actually went up for a little while today. It's been trending up. It's up way over last year, something like 40% over last year. ExxonMobil has evacuated some personnel from the Middle East amid growing instability in the region due to the ongoing U.S.-Israeli conflict with Iran, CEO Darren Woods told Reuters in an interview today. Quote, our first and highest priority is making sure our people remain safe, and we evacuated folks who weren't critical or essential to the operations that we were providing support for, as he leaves a preposition dangling. Now, the key here is I don't know exactly where these are, so I'll look this up and get the information for you. I didn't have enough time to look up exactly where they are, but I know that some of these locations, as you can see here, are in Qatar. Reuters reported that Exxon scaled back some of its operations in the region to manage oil inventory levels as shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, a critical maritime checkpoint, remains disrupted. Gas, oil prices, the company is a partner of Qatar-owned petroleum company Qatar Energy, which halted production of liquefied natural gas and related products last week with a force majeure following a reported Iranian attack. So they said, we're not going to supply things despite the fact that we've got contracts for them. Remember that, right? Qatar's Ministry of Energy, Saad Sharida Al-Kabi, has warned that a prolonged conflict could lead Gulf states to halt exports within weeks. ExxonMobil is also one of the largest U.S. investors in Abu Dhabi, helping operate Upper Zakum, the world's second largest offshore oil field, alongside the state-owned Abu Dhabi National Oil Company and Japanese company Inpex at that location. Now, companies and governments have urged people to leave the region since the U.S. and Israel first launched joint strikes. The U.S. State Department has issued a worldwide caution alert. I'll try to find out more for you. But that is ExxonMobil. Now, as far as ExxonMobil stock goes, let me just do a quick check. Give you an idea of ExxonMobil stock and see where it's going here. Okay, here we go. ExxonMobil down 1.54%. Here it is. At the close, went down $2.32, down 1.54. Over the last year, it's gone up $36.32 per share, a 32.5% increase. So that's for those of you who are concerned about Exxon, something to keep in mind, I think. Very important. I've been watching Exxon. Exxon is one of them to watch because Exxon usually has pretty strong political ties, and they have very, very strong instincts, regardless of, whether they're going to be shifting a little bit towards green because they know Biden's coming in, or they can see some trends, so they'll devote a little bit to that, or it's getting out of these regions. Exxon's usually ahead of the game. So there you go. Now, a little bit on the U.S. economy. Prolonged Iran war could shrink U.S. corn acres, analysts say. Yep, here's the link. Lancelot. Prolonged Iran war could shrink U.S. corn acreage. I added acreage because I'm such a deft reader. Now, Reuters' Naveen Thukral and Ed White reported that, quote, the world's farmers face soaring fertilizer and fuel prices. What a shock. Not like we've been discussing that even back when Biden was starting to block the Russian energy, right? Of course, the world's farmers, and what we saw in Europe, the same thing, natural gas. They need natural gas. The world's farmers face soaring fertilizer and fuel prices as the war in the Middle East escalates, leaving some scrambling for supplies as the spring planting season approaches. Exactly the worst time. It's almost as if Donald Trump really wants this to happen. Prices in the U.S., which imports much of its fertilizer needs, natural gas, despite a large domestic industry, rose at the war's outbreak, Thukral and White reported. Prices for fertilizer itself jumped from $516 per metric ton on Friday up to $683 at the import hub of New Orleans on Thursday. Prices could jump higher if the Persian Gulf closure persists. Seth Meyer, former USDA chief economist and now at the Food and Agriculture Policy Research Institute, said farmers might alter crop choices and fertilizer applications due to the price spike. Quote, farmers need fertilizers for virtually all their crops if they want a good yield. So guess what Donald Trump will be doing? giving them money. That's what he'll be doing. But each crop and soil they are grown in have different demands. Farmers could cut back on corn, which requires higher rates of nitrogen fertilizer, or else sharply reduce fertilizer application rates, Meyer said. Now, if they do that with corn, what's going to happen to ethanol, which is required to be 15% in most fuel mixes? Man. And Persian Gulf economies exported $50 billion of nitrogen fertilizers since 2020. And that's just the fertilizer. Again, the natural gas source that is necessary for worldwide fertilizer supplies is massive. It's essential. And then you've got pharmaceuticals with petroleum. Now, gas prices in the United States. Anybody live in California? Karen, I see you've got a great comment here. Make love, not war. The old 60s adage. Well, guess what? Max Blumenthal notes, my friends in California are seeing $8 per gallon in Los Angeles. Working class Americans are getting destroyed at the pump because Trump launched a war of choice on Iran. Now, that audio was a little bit low. So the production team and I here at You Know What went into this and we expanded on it. Time for an economic analysis, my friends. Here we go.
And as the war continues, the national average for a gallon of gas is up nearly 50 cents since the war started 1 week ago.
Here in Los Angeles County, the average for a gallon of regular unleaded is now well over the $5 mark, spiking 17 cents overnight. As Eyewitness News reporter Madison Weil tells us, the price is now more than $8 a gallon at one local gas station.
If you filled up your tank this week, you probably saw it. Gas prices across SoCal once again on the rise.
I want to pause it there, everybody, because if you didn't get to see it, if you're just listening in audio, the average price across LA County is $5.17 per gallon. Now, at a certain point, that expense is going to get high enough that Gavin Newsom's stupid push for EVs will look economically feasible.
And I'm just getting killed right now. Gas prices are so high, and, they were high before this war.
According to AAA, gas prices were already rising in line with seasonal norms when the joint U.S.-Israel attack on Iran sent oil prices soaring. Prices at the pump now up almost 50 cents a gallon in just 1 week since the war began.
Hopefully something happens about it. I really can't do nothing but complain.
The average price of a gallon of gas in California is now over $5. In LA County, it's $5.17. That's up 17 cents just overnight. Down in Orange County, $5.15. And in Riverside County, $5.06. We stopped by one of the cheapest gas stations we could find, this American Oil in Exposition Park, where drivers could fill up for a little over $4.
I'm all the way searching for cheaper gas. So right now, that's how Los Angeles working. So
just a few miles away in downtown, drivers with sticker shock at this Chevron, a gallon, $8.21.
It's insane work. It's too high. I definitely won't be coming here for that.
And I just actually could not believe my eyes when I saw that $8. That's wild.
And it's not just the war in Iran. Experts say California's regulatory policies are also driving prices up as in-state gasoline production is down. These prices obviously impact so many of us here in Southern California. As always, a great resource is gasbuddy.com. You can find the cheapest gas closest to you.
So remember, Phillips moved out last year. And when they mentioned that seasonal changes in demand, we're seeing an increase in price. That's only part of it, of course, because they didn't lift the restriction on the import of Russian fuel. Donald Trump, even though he opened up the Gulf of Mexico to exploration and reopened the areas that were supposed to be open in ANWR that Joe Biden shut down, basically 2/3 of the areas of ANWR that were supposed to be open. And again, it shouldn't have anything to do with federal policy. It should be up to the people of Alaska, according to the federalist system. But Donald Trump allowing that doesn't mean that there's going to be this ready supply, right? They've got to explore, they've got to recover, they've got to refine it, and they don't have the refineries. They haven't built new refineries in the United States for decades. The whole thing is, it's like, it does seem like they've intentionally done it, administration after administration. Now, Biden, part of it, as I mentioned, Biden was interested in trying to raise the price of fuel oil so high that his green companies that he adored so much in his fascist way, like Proterra and others, that their products would start to look relatively worthwhile, that the EVs would be seemingly a good investment, regardless of the fact that they don't operate in cold weather, they catch fire and explode very easily, spontaneously burst into flames, that sort of stuff. That it takes ages to recharge them. You don't know what to do with the batteries afterwards. They use a lot of caustic chemicals inside the batteries, all those nonsense things. Of course, Joe Biden and people like Jennifer Granholm and Kamala Harris love the EVs. So why not? If you've got a competitor called petrol that's a lower price and still attracts people through regulations like increasing the fuel mileage requirements and mandates on construction of cars, and through various things like Gavin Newsom's even more onerous requirements, which shut down a lot of truckers in California, just keep applying requirements. And then, of course, block people's ability to buy fuel, and you'll be able to get people starting to buy EVs until, of course, they realize that they stink. This is California. They've got tons of oil. That's where Phillips 66 made part of its name. Texas and California. Unbelievably stupid. Just so reckless. Incredibly reckless. So there you go. You can find that retweeted. Max Blumenthal put that out there. And that's a good story to keep in mind because it brings back some of the really, really dumb, reckless things that Joe Biden and others have done, all the way back to Barack Obama. And even before that, even with Bill Clinton and every president who did not stop those federal requirements for CAFE, the car average fuel economy standards. So to bring it all back, let's get to the final notes on the war making and the killing. I want to give you some of this information, everybody. This is, I think, key from the news notes. You tell me if you agree. Go back to the top to finish off the program. As I noted earlier, President Trump's latest pronouncements on the immoral and unconstitutional U.S. aggression against Iran ring as hollow as ever, revealing a conflict that's anything but the easy win he once touted. This disgusting assault, launched without congressional declaration of war, funded through tax theft and enslavement of future generations, continues to claim innocent lives while draining American pockets. On Monday, stocks briefly surged after a CBS reporter claimed Trump described the war as, quote, very complete, pretty much. Yet, when pressed, Trump muddled through contradictions, insisting it's both nascent and very complete, adding, quote, we've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We go forward more determined than ever to achieve ultimate victory that will end this long-running danger once and for all. He dubbed it, quote, an excursion into something that had to be done. But, quote, we're getting very close to finishing that. So again, making utterly no sense, speaking in two different ways, ridiculous. This nonsense, I noted, sounds like the vague assurances one gives kids on endless errands. Amid reports of the U.S. allegedly contacting Iran to engage in ceasefire talks, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi rebuffed them flatly and said, we have a very bitter experience of talking with the Americans after 3 rounds of negotiations. Still, they decided to attack us. So I don't think talking with Americans will be on our agenda anymore. And I wrote, and why would they? The U.S. bombed Iran twice during talks and assassinated their religious leader, Amid Ramadan. hardly a foundation for trust. Defiance echoed in Tehran as throngs turned out in broad daylight, regardless of U.S. threats, and they celebrated new Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini, signaling unyielding resistance. Meanwhile, in Israel, the blackout of journalism is not complete. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich revealed that his son was wounded in a Lebanese border clash, injuring 8 soldiers, with confirmed reports of Mossad chief David Barnea and Minister Ben-Gvir slain in strikes. In essence, this insane war wrecks all involved, slaughtering innocents, inflating costs via taxpayer extortion, and throttling economic stability worldwide. Liberty-minded observers must decry this unconstitutional folly before more lives and livelihoods vanish. Now, I want to show you what the New American wrote because they got it wrong. This is Arachki talking with Americans not on our agenda anymore, as he notes.
The American team in the negotiation said itself that we made a big progress, still they decided to attack us. So I don't think, talking with Americans anymore would be, on our agenda anymore. This is the result of the aggression by Israelis and Americans, which has made the whole region insecure, unstable.
Absolutely right. Now, let's go over a little bit over here. See if I've got... here's the New American. Look, reports. Iranian intel officials contacted the CIA to stop the war. No. They didn't do that. Our court Kirkwood is taking what the CIA fed to the New York Times and repeating that. That's a claim the CIA made. That's a claim. 2 news reports strongly suggest that the U.S. President Donald Trump has knuckled under to Israeli demands not to discuss a ceasefire in the war with Iran that the U.S. and Israel started on Saturday. You just heard the Iranian foreign minister. That is what they have been saying ever since this thing started. They said, no, we're done. We're done. They have been consistent. Let me show you a little bit more. As we saw this, who's inconsistent? Trump. Trump contradicts himself on Iran immediately in just a few hours. Hear this? That's right. The big news Monday afternoon was that it sounded like the war might be just about over, at least judging by Trump's comments. Of course, no, the war was not very complete. And of course, it was not just the beginning. We don't know what it is. Let me give you some final thoughts on this. This one coming to us via RT. RT had excellent coverage on this, so let me give this to you. Here we go. RT hitting it. And by the way, yeah, I'll tell you in a minute. Here we go.
Historical sites. They also attack hospitals, the schools. So they are attacking our civilians. They are indiscriminately targeting facilities.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says oil exports will be blocked until the war stops, as energy prices explode globally, sparking shortages. Locals in India and Bangladesh tell RT their livelihoods are on the line.
There will be a huge impact on the budgets of common people. Increasing the price of petrol and gas cylinders will raise the price of rations. The ongoing war will have a huge impact.
Israeli forces strike several towns across Lebanon. The UN says 700,000 civilians in Lebanon have been displaced since the start of the war. A warm welcome. It's 7 p.m. here in Moscow, and this is RT International with the latest global news. It's good to have you with us. Well, our top story, Iran is refusing to surrender or even negotiate with the U.S. and Israel, which are bombing the Islamic Republic for an 11th day straight. More than 1,300 people have reportedly been killed there since hostilities began, as Tehran also hits back at targets all across the region.
We are now launching Operation Lion's Roar. We are doing this in full cooperation with our friends in the United States.
Since the Americans' bases are scattered in different places in the region, perhaps the whole region would be engaged.
Well, according to local authorities, at least 206 Iranian women and children have been killed just over the past day. This comes as the Islamic Republic is seeing more intense strikes throughout much of its territory. A major aerial assault lit up the sky over Tehran overnight, decimating residential blocks and reportedly killing at least 40 locals. Rescuers have been working tirelessly to remove civilians from under the rubble amidst increasingly strained conditions. A Red Crescent worker at the scene of that attack says the aggressors have shown a complete disregard for the lives of innocents.
As you see, the missile struck a place in the middle of the street where people pass by, not a military site. On this side, we see the metro, and the point of impact is right in the middle of the street. This is where the missiles hit, and ordinary innocent civilians were killed and injured, people who were not involved in the war. This is the model of humanitarian law that the Zionists claim to adhere to. They have crossed all red lines, and one is truly left wondering why they act in this way. They violate all the rules of war, and the reality of the war they are waging against us is precisely this, the killing of civilians that we are seeing and witnessing.
And here's viral footage from the Isfahan metro, where a worker turned himself into a human step so that women could climb onto the platform during the strikes, but appear to be indiscriminately targeting civilians. That's according to Iran's foreign ministry.
We are watching a war based on multiple lies and disinformation, intentional campaign of lies against Iranian nation. They attack water desalination facilities in Persian Island. They have also attacked many historical places. Yesterday, they attacked Isfahan. You know, Isfahan for Iranians, for the whole international community, is famous for its cultural heritage. They damaged some monumental historical sites. They also attacked hospitals, schools. The case of Mina Elementary School is a case in point. And you know, it is clear to everyone that it was hit by double-tap Tomahawk US-made missiles. So they are attacking our civilians. They are indiscriminately targeting facilities. And of course, as I said, many of these attacks would have long-term environmental consequences, which would not be limited only to Iran's borders. It would affect the whole region.
All right. I want to pause it there and close things off with a bit of a reading and get to some really, really good comments. Ashley posted this one, and I honestly don't know. I have to ask the Russians how long ago you posted this, Ashley, but she says this is great. I'm so glad we got to get that out there, and other people have been really getting that out to folks to see that montage of all those people saying short-term pain for long-term gain. And the other thing, too, again, as I mentioned, Ashley, the thing that does get me about it is not only the short-term pain for long-term gain nonsense of these people saying these things, and now I'll show you a little bit of Lindsey Graham acting like a maniac and talking about Cuba's next, and he's got the hat and all these things for, you know, all this nonsense and craziness. But just the incredible egotism and arrogance to even claim for other people what your gain or pain is. I mean, that just tells you right there. That's collectivism right there. They don't get it. They don't understand. And all these people who talk about thank you for your sacrifice for the soldiers and all these things, that's a collectivist support beam as well. Because I don't want to support any of that stuff. I shouldn't be forced to be paying for any group of people who want to thank each other for taking my money and buying arms with it and going off someplace. This is the problem. The collectivist nonsense. It's short-term pain for long-term gain. Defined by whom? The people who are holding me hostage. It's like a plantation owner standing there with a rifle pointed down at the slaves going, don't worry, guys, it's all right. With a little bit of extra work with this short-term pain, we're going to make a lot of money. We'll make sure some of it gets back to you. We'll take over Cuba. It's amazing. It's just the hubris of it is really beyond anything. It's incredible. And we have this, of course, Lindsey Graham. In D.C. and on U.S. jets, Lindsey Graham is frothing at the mouth. His eagerness to rob the survivors of his and Trump's and Israel's and the Zionist cult's immoral, unconstitutional military attack is matched only by his eagerness to do the same to Cuba and to dominate the Western Hemisphere. Here are two examples of his madness to follow up on what we showed here on Liberty Conspiracy Live yesterday. Here's his dark classic, we're going to make a lot of money line. Remember that one, right? Now, why Maria Bartiromo or others don't call him on this stuff, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense.
When this regime goes down, we're going to have a new Mideast. We're going to make a ton of money.
We're going to make a ton of money. We're going to make a ton of money. Collectivism. Then we have his thirst for Cuba. First, from January, here he is, of course, on the jet.
Could have done it, and as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed.
So, remember now, Cuba doesn't allow individual free choice. So you better realize you're going to be made to change the government of Cuba. See how that goes? I don't either. Okay. So, and then of course we've got this one from last week. This was a classic one. Here's your long distance dedication. Lindsey Graham on Fox.
Cuba's next. They're going to fall. This communist dictatorship in Cuba, their days are numbered.
Cuba's next. Now, these are all rather quiet. I know they're a little low on the volume. I didn't get to amp them up in the system. There's one of them that I did amp up. But this one, this just blasts free Cuba.
I mean, I'm not looking for a fair fight. If we get in a fight, I want to win it. I want to win it quick. I'm in Miami. You see this hat? Free Cuba. Stay tuned. Yeah. The liberation of Cuba is upon us. It's just a matter of time now. You see this hat? Make Iran great. President Trump said the only way to make Iran great is for the people to take over. We're marching through the world. We're cleaning out the bad guys.
Now, as he talks about we're marching through the world, we're cleaning out the bad guys, and he says Cuba is next. What would you do if you were in Maria Bartiromo's shoes? What would you do? I would try to take the opportunity to say, Mr. Graham, hey, maybe we're out of time, but next time you come on, you give me your arguments ethically and constitutionally as to why and how you can do this. That would be fun. Now, to round things off about Iran, here's Brett Wilkins writing for Anti-War. Iran's health ministry, as you heard on RT, said Sunday that 198 women and 190 minors have been killed by the United States and Israeli attacks since February 28th, including 6 children under the age of 5. The youngest reported victim is an 8-month-old girl. Children account for more than 30% of those killed, according to the ministry, which also said that 1,044 women and 638 children have been injured. Overall, Iran said that more than 1,300 people have been killed by the airstrikes, which are reportedly targeting 30 of the country's 31 provinces. Now, I've got more here. We've got Hegseth admits that the U.S. is not really in charge, but that it's Israel calling the shots regarding what's going to be done to the Iranians. Trump is all over the proverbial map regarding the tomahawks in the Manab school. But I want to do this for you. This is a book, and Ashley, you probably remember seeing this one. You probably might have a copy of this one yourself on Interesting Books Reviewed. The host on Interesting Books Reviewed went through a series of books that he thought were good to read on the Israel-Persian conflict. But if you go to chapter 62 of the book, Against Our Better Judgment, by Allison Weir, that's W-E-I-R, Allison Weir. You go to page 62, that's chapter 12. U.S. Front Groups for Zionist Militarism. Now, this book was released, I think, over 10 years ago now. Let me just check. 2014, yeah, by Allison Weir. U.S. Front Groups for Zionist Militarism. A number of groups operated in the U.S. to support Zionist paramilitary groups in Palestine many decades ago. These often employed clandestine methods and deceptive names. The general American public had little idea about the true nature of these groups and what they were supporting. Irgun delegation, Hillel Kook as Peter Bergson. That's a person, Hillel Kook, K-O-O-K, as Peter Bergson. Now, what is that? See, here it is on the page. Okay. A covert Irgun, you remember the book Irgun that we read? The people who helped carry out the King David explosion bombing. 1948, 47, 46. A covert Irgun delegation operated in the U.S. from the late 1930s through 1948 under a half-dozen front organizations, including the Emergency Committee to Save European Jewry and American Friends of a Jewish Palestine. That's the 1930s through 1948. The main leader was Hillel Kook, the senior Irgun officer working outside Palestine, because Palestine was, of course, a place. Upon coming to the U.S., he assumed the alias Peter Bergson, and the group is often called the Bergson Boys. Heard about these guys? Not good guys. The other leader was Itzhak Ben Ami, father of Jeremy Ben Ami, founder of today's lobbying organization, J Street. Also closely involved was Ari Jabotinsky, son of right-wing Zionist leader Vladimir Zev Jabotinsky, very involved in the pre-Israel Zionist movement out of Europe. Also associated with the group was Meir Kahan, who 20 years later founded the Violent Jewish Defense League, JDL. Though historians have documented that their purpose in coming to the U.S. was to raise money for Irgun activities in Palestine, this was unknown to the multitude of high-level supporters the group eventually acquired. These supporters included, I think some of these people did know, Eleanor Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Dorothy Parker, Herbert Hoover, Will Rogers Jr., Labor leader William Green, U.S. Solicitor General Fowler Harper, and U.S. Interior Secretary Harold Ickes. Yes. The FBI suspected this illegal fundraising was going on and investigated the front groups several times, but largely bungled the investigations and failed to produce evidence. As author Raphael Madoff divulges, quote, in fact, according to Bergson lobbyist Baruch Rabinowitz, funds raised by the Bergsonites in the United States were indeed secretly transferred to the Irgun. The methods of transfer were simply so well concealed that the FBI could not uncover them. Their biographer, Israeli professor Judith Baumel, writes that the Ergun delegation quickly set about, quote, integrating themselves into the social and political culture of their temporary home, the United States. They quickly grasped that public mood, molded to a large extent by propaganda and public relations, was a dominant force in the American system of direct so-called representation. And no, it's indirect. And they soon became masters of media manipulation. Thus, besides their secret funneling of money for terrorist activities in Palestine against Palestinians, British and members of the Jewish community, the Ergun delegation engaged in numerous public activities pushing for the Jewish state in Palestine. They lobbied Congress and the White House, organized a march in Washington, and they also produced a pageant called the We Will Never Die pageant. Well, it goes on, but of course, they said that during World War II, various organizations created by the Ergun delegation frequently pushed for rescuing European Jews from the Nazis. But one of their major demands was for the creation of a Jewish army of stateless and Palestinian Jews. Well, anybody seen reports of what the 82nd is doing? Anybody seen the United States government and the U.S. military? Israel's got its military. They're based in the United States.